Welcome to this video from LearnElectrics. We've had many messages and posts from new learners about light switches. They are actually very easy to understand and to use, but can be confusing at first. So this video is intended for all those that just don't know, but you will soon. We all started off not knowing at one time, me included, and this video is also for those that want a reminder or just like watching videos on the electrics. Some typical posts and questions have asked, what are the common types of light switch? How does each type work? And can different types do more than one job? We can begin with a look at the different types of common light switch. There are three basic common types of light switch, and you should expect to come across all three types on a regular basis. First, the one-way switch. It controls the flow of electricity through just one wire. A one-way switch has two terminal holes, one for the supply cable in and another for the cable out. A two-way switch has three terminal holes. It can direct the flow of electricity through two wires or two ways. These terminals are named common, L1 and L2 on many switches, but manufacturers like to have their own numbering system, as you will find out, and the switch could be labelled L1, L2, L3, where L1 is the common, especially with older switches. In this video, we will stick to the convention of common, L1 and L2. So how do you decide which terminal is actually the common in a two-way switch if the labels are all different? Look at the switch housing. The three terminals will form a pattern. Two will be close to each other. This is L1 and L2. The other terminal will be very clearly separate from the other two. This is the common. With time, you won't even look at the labels, you will just know. And then there is the intermediate switch, often used where there are 3, 4 or more linked light switches all controlling the same group of lights. This has 4 terminal holes, and the labelling for these can also be very different between manufacturers. We'll stick to one convention here, but we will show you the other labelling styles. Again, once you understand the basics of how the switch functions, you will quickly adapt to any labelling system. The switch housing can be narrow, as shown in the photo, or it can be a square block. Recapping then, in the UK, a one-way switch has 2 holes and controls current flow along one wire. A two-way switch has 3 holes controlling current along 2 wires. And an intermediate switch has 4 holes and works slightly differently. Before we look at how the switch types work, let us remind ourselves about how to test the switch contacts. We will continuity test the switch using the low ohms range on our test meter. With the switch in the closed or on position, we should have continuity across the switch. We are looking for 0 ohms to be displayed for a good switch. Operate the switch and the contacts should open. The switch is now in the off position and your meter should read OL or 1999 ohms or whatever your meter maximum is. It's always best to test switches with the wires removed so that we know that we are only testing the actual switch and not the rest of the wiring in the circuit. Switching functions now. What does each switch do and how does it do it? A one-way switch is either off, as shown here with the contacts open and preventing current flow, or it is on with the contacts closed and allowing current to flow through the switch and along the wires of the circuit. Its switching function is on, off, on, off. With two-way switching, when current arrives at the common terminal, it is directed to either the L1 terminal or to the L2 terminal. The current has a choice of 2 directions depending on the switch setting. 2 ways for the current to flow, a two-way switch. Intermediate switches allow several switches to control one light or a group of lights. There are 2 input terminals this time, and each input can direct the current flow to either of 2 output terminals. Current flow can be what we've called here straight through, or it can be crossover. This means that L1 can direct current to L3 or L4, and L2 will do the complement of this and direct current to L4 or L3. But can the switches perform other functions? This is an often asked question. Can a two-way switch work as a one-way? And can an intermediate switch work as a two-way? The answer is yes, as we will show you now. Consider a two-way switch first. Shown on the left, current can flow from the common through the switch and along the wire at L1. The switch is on, but if we operate the switch, there is nothing connected to L2, and there are no wires for the current to flow along, so the switch is off. In this setup, the switching function is on-off, the same as a one-way switch. An intermediate switch will also function as a one-way switch. We just need to choose one of the input terminals and one of the output terminals, and the job is done. Because nothing is connected to the other two terminals, the intermediate switch will now function as a one-way switch, on-off. The intermediate switch will serve as a two-way switch as well. This time, choose one input terminal as the common and connect the two output terminals for the output wires. As shown in the upper drawing, current arrives along the red wire to pass through the switch to the green wire. Operating the switch, this now directs the current that arrives on the red wire through the switch to the blue wire. The switching function here is green-blue, green-blue, just the same as L1, L2, L1, L2 for a two-way switch. That leads us to the question of how we find the correct terminal configuration on an intermediate switch. Especially with intermediate switches, it is important to know just how the switch is functioning. Because manufacturers have used their own preferred labelling style, over the years I've learned that it is often advisable to test the switch myself before installing, just to make sure that I have the correct terminals. And write it down, make a note of how that particular manufacturer has arranged the labels on the switch. So how do we know if L1 and L2 are the inputs, or is it L1 and L3? Let's look at this. The easiest and quickest way is to carry out a low ohms or continuity test on the switch before connecting anything to it. Follow the top table first. With the test meter set to low ohms, we can test between L1 and L2. Shown here, it displays OL, meaning that there is no connection between them. Your meter might show 1999 ohms or some other meter maximum. Stay with L1 and test L1 to L3. Here the reading is 0 ohms. It's found a connection, continuity. When we test L1 to L4, the result is OL or 1999 ohms, no continuity. We've now tested all permutations to L1. Now operate the switch and the internal contacts will change over. Carry out the same tests again. L1 to L2 is OL, no continuity. L1 to L3 is also OL, no continuity. And L1 to L4 is now 0 ohms, continuity has been found. Looking at the results, we can see that L1 to L2 never changes. And these are the two input terminals. They are never connected together. By elimination, L3 and L4 must be the outputs. What would we have as test results if the switch was labelled differently? Let's test and see. Carry out the test for the previous switch style and note the results. Looking at the two tables shown, we can see that L1 to L3 never changes. It is always OL, no continuity. But L1 to L2 and L1 to L4 do change over when the switch changes over. And so do the test results between continuity and no continuity, on-off, on-off. Because L1 to L3 never changes, because they are never connected, this means that these must be the two input terminals. Some intermediate switches have two L1 terminals and two L2 terminals. It's fairly obvious by just looking at the switch that the two L1s are the inputs and the two L2s are the outputs. But there is nothing stopping you from testing them as we've just done. If you wish, it's all good practice. So a quick summary of the switch type functions, what each switch can do. One-way switches can only be used as one way. A two-way switch can be used as a two-way and as a one-way. And an intermediate switch will function as an intermediate switch, a two-way switch, and a one-way switch. This table shows you in an easy visual form what we've just said. And you can see from this that an intermediate switch is pretty much a universal switch. It can be configured to do the job of any of the others, and a very useful switch to keep as a spare in the back of the van. And there we have it, a quick and very basic introduction to the switch types and functions. I hope you found it useful and informative, and that you've added a little something to your mental toolbox. Thank you for watching this video, it is very much appreciated. Please subscribe to our channel to get access to all of our videos, and remember to click on notify to be sure of not missing our next video. And you will find even more information, videos and help on our website at LearnElectrics.com. And don't forget that you can also type in LearnElectrics, all one word, into the YouTube search bar to go directly to our channel at any time from any computer. We are constantly adding new videos to our channel, don't miss the next one. And once again, thank you for watching, and we hope to see you again very soon.